Juliette Powell wants to hook you up. Not for sex. She wants you to get busy with something much more long-lasting and rewarding, running a successful business with social networking. Her new book, 33 Million People in the Room, is a quick, useful read for anyone afraid of a world gone social networking crazy. It's a bit of a religion, but Powell does wonders for demystifying the cult of online connections. Juliette, welcome to Mr. Media.
Thank you so much, Bob. That's quite an intro there.
No, we just make it up as we go along.
I was going to say, did you write that yourself, or did you ask for your listeners to suggest intros for me?
No, I actually wrote that myself. You're welcome. I think.
I love it. No, that's great. That's quite a way to introduce the subject. Frankly, I think that a lot of people these days are looking at social networks as something that is just for kids, yet more and more people are utilizing it for their own branding purposes, to launch new businesses, and especially in this economy, to look for new jobs and new opportunities out there.
Well, and I want to ask you, who is the book written for? It seems like, is it written for, a startup business or an existing business or somewhere in between, or just anyone involved in business?
I think that there's a little something for everyone. There's something for, the mom and pop shop that are trying to expand or survive in this economy. There's also something for the larger corporations that, really have all of these layoffs that are happening within their company, are looking for redundancies, and also looking for the talent that they already have that they aren't necessarily maximizing on. So things like internal wikis allow them to be able to form teams that are not necessarily within the same departments, but rather where you've got talents of multiple people from a cross-section of different departments within a company that can work together and form new organic teams. So it reduces redundancy and a number of other issues in larger corporations. And then, of course, you've got the entrepreneurs, and I think we're going to be seeing more and more entrepreneurs emerge as the layoffs occur. People that won't have a choice but to start, working on that project that they've been putting to the side because they felt they didn't have the time or the energy. Now's the time to do it. There's a lot of talent out there.
Are you at all concerned that with all the talk of social networking and all the terminology that comes with it, that we're creating two classes of business people, the class that understands all this stuff and the class that is scared to death of it?
Well, one of the things that emerges within social-based technology is this idea of transparency and authenticity. And so I think that there's a lot of fear within organizations that have been around for a long time that have a certain modus operandi that aren't necessarily as comfortable with opening up their doors and listening to their clients, their customers, their employees. And then you have new and emerging companies that are extremely comfortable with it because they realize that that's the best way to maximize not only the people that are within those organizations, but also to maximize the knowledge that's out there.
Who do you think would benefit from reading this? Now, obviously, there are a lot of people who live with this stuff every day, but then there's a lot of people who don't. Who would you like to see reading your book?
Well, I think that, again, there are so many people out there that are looking to reinvent themselves, looking to find new ways to maximize the things that they really love to do but haven't necessarily found a way to make money out of it. So I think that it's a great idea to start listening and reading and also going out there and attending those conferences. So I'm thinking of business people that, again, have been part of a larger organization for a long time and are looking for new avenues, entrepreneurs who want to get those startups happening despite the economy, but also my mom. Here's somebody who has a very basic knowledge of technology, and she's got a lot of time on her hands. She's got, very little disposable income and has some talent. And so she's looking at ways to maybe, start a blog. And since she loves to shoot video as well, so she's starting a video blog. And she started teaching people of her own age how to use these tools so that she's actually getting paid to explore the things that she loves. And I think that that's really what this book is all about. It's about building on your social capital. So the people that are around you, how can you add value to their lives? How can you begin affecting the culture within your networks and your extended networks? And what can you all do together to co-create the future? Again, yes, in a business sense, but also in a personal branding sense. When you put yourself at the center of the universe in terms of your own networks, you become the go-to person, so you have more information and therefore you can make more informed decisions about your life.
And Juliette, what is your expertise and background for writing this book?
Well, that's very fortunate. I grew up in media, so in broadcast television. While I was learning how to program computers, I was also offered an engineering degree, and so I've got a real cross-section of different interests in media, technology, science, business. I grew up in Canada, born here in New York, and worked with, everyone from the founder of the Cirque du Soleil to people from Wired Magazine to the founder of the TED Conference. And so I noticed that there are certain patterns between all of these industry leaders, and it was really about building that social capital, choosing the best people to surround themselves with, and then working together to build a company. And, of course, I detail much more of that within the book itself. I also, go over the Obama online strategy.
Obama, did he have an online strategy? I must have missed that.
I think that there's a lot to learn there, and certainly a lot of energy going towards trying to harness all of the the volunteers and all of the people that wanted to see a big change happen. What happens now that the man is elected? Do they just go back to their regular lives, or is there a possibility of using that momentum and seeing what else that we can do from a grassroots perspective?
Well, so let me ask you, is there something that the average business person can learn and take away from the way that the Obama campaign was structured? Is that stuff just applicable to political campaigns, or can anyone learn from that?
Well, I think, again, first and foremost, there's looking at things from a business perspective, but there's also looking at things from a branding perspective, a personal branding perspective. I think that some of the key companies out there are being led by visionaries, by people that aren't afraid to be authentic and inject their companies as well as the company's culture with that authenticity. And it's that message that, is going through the chain of employees that they have, also their clients, but also the utilization of social networks by their employees. Once an employee gets a very strong sense of what the company is, what it represents, how they can add value to that company. If they're already on Facebook or LinkedIn, they're probably already in conversation talking about all of these positive things. And so those visionary entrepreneurs and leaders are already kind of leading the way for their employees as well as for the industry as a whole by being on Twitter, by having a strong blog, by having a presence at conferences and whatnot. And that makes a huge difference, I think, in terms of being able to position yourself, especially in these hard times. And that applies to small companies as well as to large companies and individuals.
Folks, if you'd like to talk to Juliette Powell, author of the new book, 33 Million People in the Room, How to Create, Influence, and Run a Successful Business with Social Networking, give us a call. The number is 1-646-595-3135. You can also submit questions via the live web chat that always accompanies the live Mr. Media interview. Tell me about the title, 33 Million People in the Room. Where did you picked that number out of thin air, right?
Not exactly. I think that I did a lot of research with respect to networking and power laws and whatnot. And one of the things that I found particularly interesting was that if you put two people in a room, let's say you and I, for example, we're in a virtual room right now, and let's say that we have 25 people in common, which we probably do. If we were to start looking at all of the people that we know and all of our acquaintances and interests, we probably do know about 25 people between the two of us. So if you look at Reed's Law, which is really based on social networks that are built on co-creation. So let's say that we both have very common interests and common goals. Therefore, if we decided we wanted to collaborate together, it would be a co-creation system. So again, between the two of us, plus our 25 connections, that's 2 to the power of 25. That's over 33 million connections between the two of us to be able to advance on those common goals together if we so decide to.
Well, while you were saying that, I just decided to go look for you on Twitter. And I am now following you on Twitter.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you use Twitter a lot?
Quite a bit, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about that experience. How has that augmented your presence online? How has it helped your show? I think that probably is the best illustration of the power of social networking if you use it a lot.
Folks, I think the tables were just turned on me. Well, every time there's a new Mr. Media show, Twitter feed picks it up and puts the word out. And, of course, that goes on Twitter, that goes out to Facebook, that goes to Plaxo, and God only knows where else that might go. It's been very useful getting the information about a new show out in front of people that, I might not know how to reach otherwise. I gave up more than a year ago trying to send out an email newsletter. I found that just ticked people off. But the Twitter thing, it seems to be a low impact. Well, it's a high-impact, low-annoyance factor, frankly.
Right, and it's absolutely free. And at the same time, are you getting a higher level of engagement? Are you getting feedback on the things that you're talking about or ideas for other shows or people to interview?
Absolutely, yeah. Not as high a level as I would like to see, but I suspect that will come. I'm pretty patient about these things.
Well, and I think that's part of it. I mean, you sound like a really authentic guy who knows his stuff, who has a genuine interest in people and ideas. And I think that the more that's true, the more that message is going to come across. And hopefully the people that are being interviewed on your show are also connectors so that they're, also following you on Twitter once they hear about you and have a chance to engage with you, and that they're also telling, their micro audiences about you and your show and vice versa, right? So that there's this positive feedback loop, the spiral effect, if you will, if we all start promoting each other and helping each other.
Well, let's do that. I see right now you have 132 followers. Do you mind if we give out your Twitter address?
No, of course not. Go ahead.
All right. You can follow Juliette Powell at twitter.com/Juliette, Juliette, Powell, Powell. That's all solid, Juliette Powell. So let's see. Now, if the needle doesn't move at all, I'll be terribly embarrassed. But hopefully, we'll get you a few more people there. I wanted to take you, if you don't mind, through. And you do this in the book. You have a section devoted to each of the major social networking services. I wonder if we can talk about each and distinguish them and talk about, what kind of business or person, because we're really talking about business, each of these would be appropriate for. Why don't we start with, one of the biggest, although I think it's fallen into a bit of disfavor, and that would be Myspace.
Right. So Myspace was traditionally launched based on music, right? So you had a much younger audience. Lots of bands were discovered thanks to Myspace. There is still a huge engagement. Thousands of people are still adhering to Myspace for the first time on a daily basis. But certainly, if you look at the numbers of Facebook, they have greatly surpassed in terms of the commitment, especially of business people. 1/3 of people on Facebook are over the age of 30, which is quite astonishing to a lot of people because they still think of it as, the social network that was started in, 3 people's dorm room. But it's astounding also to see that same technology was also, very much a part of Obama's online strategy. So Chris Hughes, one of the co-founders of Facebook, was instrumental in setting up the social network for Obama and also getting all of that engagement through social media and specifically through Facebook. So you can start to feel the power of Facebook in terms of getting larger issues out there, larger causes out there. Also, I think it's very important for businesses to not decide on which social network to focus on arbitrarily. It's very important to focus on where your employees and where your clients and customers are already having a conversation. Where do they live, as opposed to trying to impose a space on them that they're not necessarily comfortable with or familiar with. It's important to stop and listen and do some research and find out, where are they? Are they on Twitter? Are they on Facebook? Are they on LinkedIn? Are they on Orkut? And the book definitely details, the demographics and the headspace and the utilizations of the social networks, at least at printing. But, of course, that changes on an ongoing basis, so you really have to do the research that suits your company.
Now, I think in the book you indicate at the time you went to press that
right.
Twitter had 2 million users. I'm guessing it is multiples of that by now.
Well, that's quite possible. I haven't checked recently, to tell you the truth. It's been a little bit of a whirlwind. We just launched the book on Tuesday, which was fantastic. We had people from, everybody from CBS to the BBC to, Fast Company magazine, Time. It's amazing the individuals and the companies that came out to celebrate this book, and probably because it's a book that's based on the community itself, not just on the success stories and their underlying patterns, but also, the issues that these larger companies are going through in terms of trying to implement some of these strategies, and also individuals that are coming from places like CBS Interactive and being laid off. Where do I go to now? What do I do? How do I use these skill sets? And so it's about applying them in a very different context. That's really important to note when you start thinking about yourself and reinventing yourself and using, social networking sites. In often cases, it's about reinventing yourself or reinventing your brand or being a little bit more authentic and transparent in terms of communicating your story.
I know I spoke to, I interviewed a woman yesterday who's an artist, and she was telling me, and I'm going to try to look it up while we're talking. She's telling me about a site that she uses to sell her art, and this is one I had never heard of. I want to say it's Etsy or Etsy.com. And now this is interesting. This is a woman who's creating art. This is her business. She does this, for a living. Mm-hmm. And she's in St. Petersburg, Florida, where I am. And instead of just relying on the local market, which can get very burned out on one person, that once the usual suspects have bought your art, right. You're pretty out of it. Well, here it is. It's Etsy, ETSY.com. Mm-hmm. And she says it's this marketplace where she's found, stores that are taking her art in, people who are buying her art. And I guess where I'm going with this is there's direct marketing over the internet where you can use these social networks, and then there's indirect where you get exposure and it pays off in an indirect way.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of indirect marketing. I really despise the hard sell. When people try to sell me anything, I automatically bring up a wall. I just feel like, if I'm in the store to start with, it's because I'm open to looking for something, but it's really my time and whatever catches my eye or whatever I walk into for specifically, so that when that person comes up to me and says, can I help you? What would you like? Have you seen this or that or the other thing? I almost feel like they're stepping on my toes and walking into my own personal space. So I like the idea of, enabling your customers to be your advocates, so that if she does have a bunch of clients that, are excited about her paintings and want to share it, obviously, with the people that come to their homes for dinner parties, or if these are paintings that are going into corporate institutions, these are for showcasing. So why not get some of those people together and do an event where it's good for the companies and the individuals that have potentially purchased the paintings, maybe do a fundraiser, for example. So it's great exposure for everybody, and it's also great exposure for her and her art. right? And you start creating these networks, these affinity networks that happen face-to-face, but a lot of the organization can happen online through the social networking tools.
I thought she was a good example of someone who was not necessarily, web-oriented and was not looking to start an internet-based internet business like we would think of certain websites. But it kind of spoke to that. Really, anybody in almost any type of business can find a way to apply the social networking skills to their business and make it grow. It's just I think there's a little hump that a lot of people have to get over in terms of connecting the real world with the unreal world, if you will.
Yeah, well, more and more, it's become a more holistic world, I think. I mean, just walking around with a cell phone or a smartphone in particular means that you've got a whole world of connections that's fitting right into your pocket or into your purse. And so if you're not using those connections, what are you doing with them? Right? We all have hopes, dreams, aspirations, businesses to build and rents to pay and families to feed. And so now's the time to really start using your imagination and see, what kind of resources do the people in your network have? Right? And the only way to really find that out is to start sending out a message of what you really hope to do. What are you trying to accomplish? And then start feeling out your resources and seeing who can do what, who can add what, who can introduce whom to get a little bit closer to that goal. And it's funny how the word spreads when somebody's really dedicated to accomplishing something. People love to get on board and help you out, but they can't do that unless they know about it. So social networks are a great way to do that. And I think that we're much more used to doing that face-to-face if you're a little bit older. But it's essentially the same tools. You're just using the Internet to do it. But I really do advocate in the book, as well as in my own, professional and personal life, the sense of going out, meeting people face-to-face, and then following up online so that you've already got that connection and you're just reinforcing it through the online component. It's a great way to start.
Now, we've talked a little bit about MySpace, a little about Facebook, a little bit Twitter, I think. Now, but you also talk in a book about some more specialized services. There's Orkut, there's High Five, there's Bebo, LinkedIn. Right. Now, who would be appropriate to network on these services?
Well, again, I think that it's interesting because Orkut was launched by a gentleman who worked for Google. And it was seeded by a really well-chosen group of people, and ironically, it took off more in Brazil than it did anywhere else. If you go on Orkut, it's absolutely fascinating to see the difference in the way that people are really showcasing various aspects of themselves as opposed to a Facebook or LinkedIn, which is far more corporate. If you go to Orkut, you'll notice questions on the profile, for example, that are, something that you might see on a dating site here. What type of person do you like to date? What is your favorite, color? What is your astrological sign? These are not questions that I've ever seen on a LinkedIn profile or a Facebook profile, or not even on a MySpace profile unless you've got those specialized applications. So I think that if you start to look at the culture of whom you are trying to reach, it'll give you, again, a much better indication as to which social network will work the best for you. If you don't have a lot of time and can't be on 20 different social networks, you really have to narrow it down as to what you're trying to achieve, who's your target market, and what's going to be your strategy going forward. Do you only have a couple of hours a week, or can you go on there every day and really give it a dedicated effort? And so these are questions that you have to ask yourself no matter which social network that you're looking for, but also looking at the culture within the social network. High Five is very, very popular in Asian markets as opposed to North America. So for people that that travel a good deal or have friends internationally, this might be a great way to look at opportunities for work outside of the United States, or find out about new artists or new innovations that you wouldn't necessarily get on a Facebook or on a Myspace. But again, for business purposes, I think it's really important not necessarily to just focus on what you are most comfortable with, but where is your audience? Where do they live? And that's where you need to start being part of the conversation that probably already exists.
Mm. See, now it's interesting because I looked at, I was reading that section of the book, and I hadn't really thought, I use the social networking. I use Facebook and I use Twitter and LinkedIn, and I'm probably skipping something, thinking there's probably something else, maybe Vox. And I use them pretty much exclusively to market Mr. Media and get the word out. And I hadn't really thought about, I knew that Orkut was very Brazilian, very popular in South America, and I hadn't really thought about maybe creating a profile in some of these. But now I'm thinking, maybe that was an oversight on my part, because something like this could easily be heard and enjoyed, anywhere. You don't have to be here in the United States, for example. So.
No, but it's also really interesting when you start looking at the numbers. The millions and millions of people in different markets that you're just not tapping into because you don't know how. You don't necessarily think that you've got any friends that are. But yeah, by going into a social network that services other cultures as well as other markets, you really have the opportunity to become a leader. Right, so if I doubt that you'd have the level of competition within a Bebo, a High Five, or an Orkut in terms of Blog Talk Radio, then and specifically your show, than you would, if you start looking at what's available through Facebook or Myspace, or LinkedIn for that matter. I think that LinkedIn is probably the first stop for most business people, but it's just about putting up your profile and maybe joining a few groups, adding a few applications, and boom, you're in. But again, once you start actively network within that space, you also realize that you're always talking to the usual suspects, and the usual amount of competition is very, very high. So yeah, it's a great way to expand your audience and your market.
What about? I don't think you wrote about this in the book. Social networks such as Ning, NING.com, where you can go and create your own network within their network. Is that a good business application?
Well, I think that, again, it really, really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, and there are some very specific strategies within the book depending on where you sit and what type of company that you're running or an employee of. But certainly Ning is one of my favorites, and we do mention it in the book. Essentially, my good friend Rachel Masters left her job at Warner here in New York to go work for Ning because she believed so much in it. And she, explained it to me during an interview that we did for 33 million people in the room as being a great opportunity for individuals and companies to create their own internal social network for free. So here's a great opportunity to kind of seed it with the kind of conversation that you want to have on a social network. There are a lot of organizations that are using it for training platforms for employees across America or even across the world. This is the place that they've set up to be able to have those conversations that you don't necessarily get to in the meetings, or that you can't necessarily have in internal or intranet email. And so they've been very, very fruitful for companies that don't necessarily want to invest in the infrastructure of a social network, of building it from scratch, that is. And you can also white label Ning. In other words, you can just pay a basic fee on a monthly basis to get rid of any advertising that they would want, and you can brand it with your own company so that for anybody that's logging in, they would feel like they're going to the company's social network as opposed to Ning.com or an outsourced social network. So again, it's a great way to kind of explore the possibilities without expending a lot of money and seeing some of the benefits happen before investing in it in a more long-term basis.
Now, on their face, these sites are free. We've talked about Facebook, MySpace, Ning, to a degree. But are there some hidden costs for a business, whether in labor or something else, that they need to consider? Okay, if you're going to get involved in this, you're going to commit to this social networking. You have to have someone, for example, someone who's actually going to go in there and be responsive to the people who participate with you, that kind of thing.
Well, absolutely. And I think that, again, whether it's on a social networking platform or just in a discussion group online, it's very important for companies right now to realize that they have to be part of the conversation. And that means that it's no longer unidirectional where you're sending out a message as a company and hoping that your clients and your customers are listening and will be receptive. It's about engaging them in a conversation where you have to be responsible for listening to the feedback that you're receiving from your clients and customers. And so, yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important not only for there to be clear lines of communication within companies, therefore, to start exploring online social networking components for your employees in a very private way, but also just going out there and making sure that you are really making it a priority to say we're opening up the doors to listen to our customers and we're going to start implementing some of the things that come up. And so, many companies want to hire an outside marketing team to set that up, but it's not very authentic. And frankly, online consumers might be very different from the consumers that will buy your products or services in a bricks and mortar kind of situation. So, they smell things that are not authentic online very, very quickly. So you need to get employees within your corporation that really believe in your brand, really believe in your products and services, that are there, that are moderating some of your customers that are already online. Again, once you know where they live, engage them to become your spokespeople, to moderate conversations and discussions that are happening about your products and services and company online. So you need to give them positive feedback, positive reinforcement. It really has to be a circular conversation, as opposed to one way.
A lot of them seem to miss that. I mean, anyone who's been referred to a website to make a complaint or offer a suggestion or ask a question about a product, and you go to and you fill out their form, and they get all this information about you, and then they never get a response. And I think that some businesses, it's like you say, they do have to listen, and they have to have somewhat of a response. A lot of them don't get that, even today. It's been going on for years. So that's why I asked you about that.
Well, and I guess that's why I asked you earlier, when you and I were talking about your Twitter usage and how, you were starting to get some kind of resonance from your customers and audience members, I should say. And are they engaging you? Are they asking you, we want more of this, we want more of that? Are they suggesting, specific people that you might want to interview in the future? And if not, what are you doing to encourage them to do that? Right? Because I think it's very important for us to take responsibility, not only for our usage of the technology, but also engaging our audience so that it grows and so that they feel like you really are listening and that you care.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very fair issue. I respond, this is a one-man show right now. I respond to everybody one way or the other, whether I can help them or not, or what. And I get a lot of inquiries from people who want to, be on the show or represent somebody who want to be on the show, and I respond to all that. I do think, if the show continues to grow, both listeners and inquiries, that I would have to reach a point where I'd have to have someone helping with that. And I think, okay, this is a small operation, relatively speaking, but if there was a quantum leap in listenership and engagement, I would have to think about having someone involved. And I don't know that we always talk, well, this is free, that's free, you can do that. Well, there is some involvement and there is some cost to people, I think.
Well, I still think that the barriers to entry are pretty low. I mean, do you have some hardcore fans? Do you have people that, come rain or shine, no matter what's happening, listen to your show and give you feedback on an ongoing basis? Because it seems to me that those would be, your key proponents for the show. These are the people that I'm guessing want to talk to their friends and other companies about you, right?
Oh, sure. Well, I sure hope so. I sure hope so. Let me. I want to change gears because we're gonna wrap up in a few minutes. I wanted to ask you about the Gathering think tank. I'm honestly not familiar with this. I read about it in some background information on you in the book, and I'm kind of wondering, and let me give out the website. People can look at it. It's thegatheringwebsite.com, all solid. What is that?
Well, I mentioned earlier I was very fortunate to help produce the TED conference. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Right. So the TED conference was started by a gentleman by the name of Richard Saul Wurman, and for several years he asked me to help him produce it and organize it. 72 people, all world leaders, world thinkers, from Nobel Prize laureates to change makers and newsmakers. And so it suddenly occurred to me one day while I was helping with the production of that, where is my generation in all of that? I mean, these are all people that attend, that spend, $6,000 per person to be part of this group of luminaries on stage. And I wondered why there weren't people in their 20s and 30s that had the opportunity to participate in something like that, and how could that change your life if you were surrounded by people that were doing things, that were engaged in ideas and producing those ideas, what would happen? And so I moved to New York from Toronto, and I started getting together some of the people that I had read about that were doing some really amazing things in technology, science, business, and innovation. And of course, my background was in media and new media. And so we started these mini gatherings, which I think the first one was in New York City. We had 20 people. Now we've got, literally 600 people all over the world, that for the past 7 years have been coming together on an annual basis to meet face-to-face and spend 3 days together, where everybody presents their idea to the group. It's a project that you've been working on, and the rest of the group works as an advisory board. And then one project every year is chosen to be produced by the group, where the group actually brings in its resources, its connections, some of the financing, and actually makes sure that the project gets done. And so we've worked on a cross-section of those, and some really wonderful companies have come on board and encouraged us through the years as well, from NASA to the Cirque du Soleil to CNN. So a great group of people, and we're really at the intersection of science, technology, business, and innovation. And so, when you start looking at some of the great ideas of our century and the past century, and you start looking at how they happened. For example, the Industrial Revolution was essentially a group of guys that got together, and they called themselves the Lunar Society, and they would each kind of show each other what they were up to on the nights of the full moon. And eventually each one of those guys, went on to invent their own component. And when you look back in history, you see it as the Industrial Revolution. And so it's with that kind of thinking that the gathering was born.
Very interesting. And then, I'm kind of curious. You mentioned in the acknowledgments that, as you were working on the book, you discovered a lump in your chest. First of all, I want to ask if you're doing okay now, and also, how did all that affect everything that came after?
Yeah, I'm very happy to report that I am healthy and happy with a new bouncing baby book, and that it's one of those things that happens in life that's a wake-up call that makes you seriously revisit what's important to you, and if you've only got a finite amount of time on this planet, what do you want to do with that time? And writing this book was always a priority for me, especially because I never thought that I'd get an opportunity. I was offered a book deal by Financial Times Press and decided to say yes for life. And then all of a sudden, having this obstacle in my way where, I was making trips to the Mayo Clinic when I was finished with the first draft, having to go to the second draft, and it just kind of acted as a motor to the completion of the book, that no matter what happened, that I wanted to make sure that if I started this book, that I would finish it. And luckily, again, I'm perfectly healthy all as well. We're actually working on a web series that will go very much hand in hand with the ideas in this book. And so it's a continuation from the Gathering Think Tank came the book, and from the book now we will see the birth of a web series. So I'm really excited about all of the possibilities, and frankly, I think that, as I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, there's so much talent out there right now that are trying to figure out what they're going to do, that if you've got an idea for a startup, or you've got an idea for the direction that your life should be taking, now's a great time to surround yourself with some great people that maybe have a little bit more time on their hands, and see what you can do when you start connecting both online and off. And really, that's what 33 million people in the room's about.
And how's that for circling around and covering the bases? That's great. Well, folks, you can order Juliette Powell's new book, 33 Million People in the Room, at bookstores everywhere, or order it online at mrmedia.com. You can also visit her websites, 33, that's 33millionpeople.com, all solid, 33millionpeople.com, or www.juliettepowell.com. And Juliette, thanks so much for joining us in Mr. Media today. Good luck with the book.
Well, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to chat with you, and I look forward to following you on Twitter. Feel free to Facebook me, too.
I will do that. I will do that as soon as we end the show, as a matter of fact.
All right. Take care, and thanks again.
My pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye. And, folks, for more great interviews with social media and website experts, surf over to our main website, www.mrmedia.com. That's where you can listen to my earlier conversations with people like Guy Kawasaki from alltop.com, or the people behind Neighborhood America, Eats.com, Magnify.net, Webs.com, Mzinga, Taproot, MediaBistro.com, and many more. And please think about writing an online review of Mr. Media, casting a vote for Mr. Media, or marking Mr. Media as one of your favorites, whether you listen on Blog Talk Radio, Pointer Online, Digital Journal, Podcast Pickle, Vox, Folio, Mediafly, Podfeed.net, Blueberry, Zencast, or Odeo. You can also now subscribe to the blog version of Mr. Media on the Amazon Kindle Reader. Look up Mr. Media on Amazon, you'll find it. And if you subscribe to Mr. Media on iTunes, you'll never miss a show. Just search Mr. Media Interviews from within iTunes and subscribe for free. You can also listen with a piece of string and a tin can in many locations. If you've got an idea for a guest, email me directly at bob@andelman, ANDELMAN.com. It's bob@andelman.com. And as we were just discussing, you can also follow me on Facebook or on Twitter, www.twitter.com/Andelman. Thanks so much for joining me today. I always appreciate when you take a little piece of your day and share it with us.